bank angle, bank angle.
It takes only 25 seconds for Sriwijaya Air Flight 182 to spiral out of the sky. And into the Java Sea.
The airplane's acceleration was nearly approaching the speed of sound on the way down. The forces just literally shattered the airplane.
All 62 people on board are dead.
As the investigator in charge, I have the responsibility to answer to the families what caused this accident.
When investigators examine the flight data,
It all started here.
they discover an issue never flagged by the airline.
So the system allowed a defect to slip through the cracks.
Looks like it.
It's actually quite startling.
Whoa.
I just don't understand how they could have missed that.
It's shortly after 2 in the afternoon at Soekarno-Hatta International Airport in Jakarta, Indonesia. Sriwijaya Air Flight 182 is finally taxiing towards the runway. Departure was delayed almost an hour because of a monsoon.
Looks like it's laying up even more.
Good thing.
The pilot flying today is 54-year-old Captain Afwan. 34-year-old First Officer Diego Mamahit is monitoring instruments.
The captain and the first officer were both very experienced pilots. They had thousands and thousands of hours both flying and on this airplane itself.
The cabin is only half full due to the COVID pandemic. All of the 56 passengers are Indonesian nationals. Flight 182 will turn northeast from Jakarta, fly over the Java Sea to reach its destination of Pontiana on the island of Borneo.
In Indonesia, air travel is a mainstay of transportation. Because there are so many islands, customers use air transportation as a routine means of getting from one place to another.
The crew performs last-minute checks before takeoff.
Auto throttle. Arm. Flaps. 5. Stabilizer trim. Set.
They're flying a 26-year-old Boeing 737-500.
In an island archipelago like Indonesia, the 737 series airplanes is perfect. It operates well on and off of shorter runways. It was built for short-haul flights. It is very common for 737s to fly 8, 10, 12 legs in a day. It's a workhorse.
Sriwijaya 182, runway 25 right, clear for takeoff.
Runway 25 right, clear for takeoff. Sriwijaya
182.
Ready? Ready.
The crew gets ready for a busy day.
Takeoff thrust set.
They're scheduled to fly several legs by the end of their shift.
Speed increasing. 80 knots. V1, rotate. V2, positive brake. Gear up. $400. Flaps 1.
Just after liftoff,
LNAV.
Captain Afwan engages the autopilot.
Flaps up.
Most pilots really enjoy having the automatic system engaged as soon as possible. because of course they're not actually hand flying at that point. So they have a little bit more awareness of what's going on with the airplane.
Heading select.
2 minutes into the flight, the captain adjusts the plane's course, and the autopilot turns the plane east towards its destination. In the cabin, passengers settle in for the 90-minute flight. As the plane continues its ascent, the captain switches the engine power setting from takeoff thrust to climb thrust.
Jet engines, like any other engine, sustain more wear at very high power settings. So once you get airborne, you reduce to a climb thrust setting so that you're reducing wear on the airplane.
Captain?
Almost 3 minutes into the flight, the first officer spots something concerning.
Looks like it might get rough ahead.
You always try to give the passengers the smoothest ride that you can, so we don't fly through thunderstorms.
Let's turn a bit further east to be safe. Check if heading 075 is open.
Yes, Captain. Request heading 075 degrees to avoid
Weather, Sriwijaya 182.
Sriwijaya 182, heading 075 approved.
075, Sriwijaya 182.
The crew is given permission to divert to the right, around the weather. But the new route is very busy today.
Sriwijaya 182, stop climbing at 110.
To avoid other aircraft, they're instructed to level off at 11,000 feet.
Stop climbing at 110.
Zero, copy, Sriwijaya 182.
Captain, change altitude to 110.
110.
The Boeing 737 continues its right turn. Three and a half minutes into the flight,
Approach at 110.
it nears the target altitude.
110.
In the cabin, the passengers begin to sense the plane banking left. It continues until the plane is on its side. Back in Jakarta, the controller realizes Flight 182 is suddenly going off course and radios the crew.
Sriwijaya 182, what's your heading?
She gets no response. At that moment, Flight 182 is diving towards the Java Sea at an incredible speed. Captain Afwan is desperately trying to regain control of the plane. But his efforts fail.
The airplane's acceleration was nearly approaching the speed of sound on the way down. The forces just literally shattered the airplane.
A little more than 4 hours after Sriwijaya Air Flight 182 disappears from radar, search and rescue teams reach the plane's last reported coordinates, 11 nautical miles northwest of Jakarta, over the Java Sea. The team finds only an oil slick, small pieces of debris, and human remains. The Boeing 737 has disintegrated, and all 62 people on board are dead. With over 700 aviation fatalities in the last decade, Indonesia is already considered one of the deadliest aviation regions in the world.
This accident needed to be resolved fairly quickly. People needed to understand it to gain confidence of flying in that region.
Divers soon discover that most of the wreckage is buried in mud, 50 feet below the surface.
The scope of the wreckage was very wide, and it was monsoon season in Indonesia where heavy rain and strong wind. So it was challenging for us to recover the wreckage.
It's up to the team of investigators from Indonesia's National Transportation Safety Committee, the KNKT, to find out why the 737 plunged into the sea. The KNKT's lead investigator, Ray Nurkayo, reviews video of the crash site of Flight 182, looking for the first clues as to what went wrong.
Nurkayo. Hey, Arnie. I'm looking at the video now. Pieces are really small. What's the distribution area of the wreckage? 80 meters by 110 meters? Okay. All right, thanks.
When I saw the debris, I was quite shocked. Even the strongest part of the aircraft, such as engine, it's destroyed. So my impression was that the impact speed was very high.
Because pieces of the plane are buried in thick mud at the bottom of the sea, it will be impossible to recover the parts that might reveal the cause of the crash. Searchers concentrate on finding the plane's 2 black boxes instead.
The black box contained the information on how the aircraft was flying, how the aircraft system performs, and the conversation of the pilots in the cockpit. It will be very difficult for us to determine the cause of the accident without the black box.
Okay, let's pull up the radar track.
Until the black boxes are found, investigators must rely on the evidence they do have, like Flight 182's radar track.
Everything looks fine so far. You turn right toward the destination. Deviates left. And drops like a rock.
Flight 182 descended more than 10,000 feet in only 25 seconds.
Both pilots were experienced pilots, so to be involved in such catastrophic accidents showed that something serious happened that the pilot could not handle.
So did the crew give any indication they had problems with the plane?
None.
Investigators contact the controller for insight.
But they requested a heading change to avoid weather.
Request heading 075 degrees to avoid weather, Sriwijaya 182.
Sriwijaya 182, heading 075 approved.
075, Sriwijaya 182.
Flying in Southeast Asia and Indonesia is always challenging. The weather is very tropical, which means that thunderstorms, monsoon rains are a matter of routine.
Okay, let's see what they flew into.
Did weather conditions play a role in the accident?
They will pull all the meteorological data available to see if there are any external forces being applied to the airplane, such as wind shear.
So this is a storm here.
They examine satellite images of the weather conditions at the time of the crash.
Had the flight path. They were definitely flying around the bad weather, not into it. But some cloud cover.
The pilot did not fly in the storm cloud. However, they were still in a cloud that prevent them to see the horizon.
Heading select.
Without more evidence, it will be hard to know if the heavy clouds played a role. Three days after the crash, the search for the black boxes is successful.
The flight data recorder has been found.
They also find the cockpit voice recorder's locator beacon. But the CVR itself has disintegrated, and the critical memory card is missing. They will need to continue sifting through the mud to find it. Will the flight data be enough to determine why the pilots lost control of Flight 182?
It will take us 2 to 5 days to read the record. Hopefully, everything will be fine, and the mystery of this incident can be unveiled.
Within days of finding Sriwijaya Air Flight 182's flight data recorder, investigators review the plane's flight parameters.
Look at that. The thrust levers should always be moving together, but they split, causing the right engine to stay at full power and the left move to idle.
The team discovers the thrust levers powering the left and right engines were at significantly different settings.
Finding the thrust lever split was a breakthrough to the investigation. It answered our questions why the aircraft veered from the flight path and dived in such ways.
That amount of split will push a plane on its side.
There was a lot more thrust on the right side of the airplane than the left side of the airplane.
But what could have caused the thrust levers to split?
It all started here, when they changed from takeoff mode to climb mode.
2.5 minutes into the flight, the captain switches the autopilot and auto-throttle settings to reduce engine power.
Less power is needed, so the auto throttle should be pulling both thrust levers back. But the right one doesn't budge.
To reach the lower combined engine power, the auto-throttle pulls the left thrust lever much further back than normal to compensate for the stuck right thrust lever.
Clearly, something was preventing it from coming back, whether the auto throttle was not commanding it properly, or was there something mechanical holding the throttle from not coming back?
But even if the auto throttle caused an asymmetry, pilots are trained to deal with this kind of issue.
During the investigation, one of our questions was why such significant differences between left and right thrust lever resulting in the catastrophic event.
A minute after the split starts, the plane starts rolling left. And then it takes about 15 seconds before the pilot disengages the autopilot and takes control. That's not the only strange thing.
Instead of leveling the plane, the captain turned it into a steeper left bank.
Light and slow. Bank angle.
Why would the captain turn the control wheel the wrong way? I see. Looks like the control wheel is holding right.
The autopilot held the control wheel right to fight the left roll.
With the right engine creating more thrust, it caused the plane to bank to the left. The autopilot fought to level the plane, but it ultimately failed.
Maybe when the captain looks at the control wheel, he thinks the plane is turning right.
The captain grabs the control wheel, disengages the autopilot, and turns left.
But of course, this was exactly the opposite action that they should have taken.
The left turn quickly becomes an irreversible left roll.
Bank angle.
Get it! 8 seconds before plunging into the water, the captain tries to salvage the situation.
Captain Afwan finally pulls the right thrust lever to idle, but it's too late.
What would have been a minor overbank condition resulted in a loss of control in flight that resulted in the loss of the airplane.
Why did the pilots end up in this situation in the first place?
Investigators still need to find out what caused the right thrust lever to jam at takeoff power. But with most of the plane's wreckage still on the bottom of the sea, they'll have to look elsewhere for clues. The investigation into the crash of Sriwijaya Air Flight 182 now focuses on the aircraft maintenance log to explain why the aircraft's right thrust lever didn't move back.
So you got the records now?
Yeah, but it's going to take a while to get through these.
The records date back to 2012, the year Sriwijaya Air leased the then 18-year-old Boeing 737.
Aircraft maintenance logs are a great source of history that lets you recreate the overall health of the airplane and ensure that it's being maintained correctly.
After every flight, a technician checks the maintenance log. It lists issues the pilot reported during the flight and the action taken to address them.
The plane flew an average of 7 flights per day. Adds up to over 10,000 pages.
Okay, let's get to it.
It will take time to review each record. Meanwhile, the victims' families are desperate for answers.
As the investigator in charge, I have the responsibility to answer to the families and the public what caused this accident. Such tragic accidents need a good explanation for the family to understand why they lost their loved ones.
We found something.
After several weeks of searching maintenance logs, investigators discover an alarming pattern.
The accident aircraft enters Srivijaya's fleet in the spring of 2012 and crashes 2021. On November 7th, 2013, a pilot reports an auto throttle malfunction. From then until 5 days before the accident flight, there are 64 more reports of auto throttle malfunction.
That's a lot.
And none of the reports are very detailed.
In fact, not a single pilot report mentions the thrust levers splitting.
The autothrottle system was routinely written up as either unserviceable or causing problems. There was not a lot of specific information.
How'd they follow up?
They tried a number of things. Most of the time, they only cleaned the connectors on the auto throttle computer, checked the computer systems, the bare minimum.
When maintenance gets back a report that the autothrottle malfunctioned, their first action is to verify if the computing system is working or not.
To do that, technicians disconnect the autothrottle computers from the system, clean the electrical connectors, and then reattach them. They then perform a computer test in the cockpit that detects and diagnoses faults.
So they'd clean the connectors, do a test, get a no faults result, and consider the case closed.
But the autothrottle problems kept on happening.
The quick fix work, such as cleaning and reconnecting, is not the correct action for the problem. The line maintenance engineer should go to the next step to fix the problem.
Did they try anything else?
Yes. From 2014 up until a week before the accident flight, they replaced various computers and other components. And then they would do the same test, get a no faults report, and put the plane back in service. only for the same autothrottle problem to pop up again within a few weeks or less.
So why wasn't the computer test catching the problem?
Because the test has limits.
The post-maintenance test only checked the autothrottle system's computers and power supply.
It wasn't capable of finding any faults in the autothrottle mechanical systems, like the cables to the engines.
They were doing what I would consider limited troubleshooting. They were utilizing the flight management computer, but interrogating a very small portion of the system.
We double-checked the logs to see if they ever inspected the cabling all the way to the engines.
And?
They never did.
Was there a persistent mechanical malfunction that Sriwijaya's maintenance department failed to detect? With much of Flight 182's shattered wreckage still sitting on the floor of the Java Sea, the Indonesian investigators come up with a novel way of finding the answer.
Does Sriwijaya have any other 737-500s like this one?
Let me check. They do. Same age, entered the fleet, same time.
Let's check its logs and see if it's plagued with similar issues.
Could the examination of a similar Sriwijaya plane explain why Flight 182's right thrust lever jammed? Investigators turned their attention to another 737-500 under maintenance in Sriwijaya Air's fleet to understand why the right thrust lever of Flight 182 might have jammed.
Well, we can't recreate the computer test, but we can still check out the thrust lever. There's resistance.
Ketika kita tahu bahwa thrust lever,
when we know that it's hard to move the thrust lever, that means there's an obstacle or friction on the cables.
Friksi pada kabel tersebut.
Okay, let's see what's going on.
The investigators check the inner workings of the throttle assembly.
Whoa. Been a while since anyone cleaned this out, if ever. Let's check the condition of the cables.
Looking at the thrust lever mechanisms in one particular area is not enough. You have to look at where it's originating from and where it's going to, in this case, from the flight deck into the engine.
Pass that up here.
They examine the cables running down from the cockpit and through the equipment bay to see if they can find something that could cause thrust levers to jam.
When you're in the electronic and equipment bay, you're doing two things. You're visually inspecting, and you're also feeling for anything that could be binding or sticky.
Check out the dried lubricant. Add some dirt and some rust. That's a recipe for cable binding.
Binding prevents the thrust lever from being pushed or pulled. It's like it's pinched.
So, the planes are the same type, same age, maintained in the same ways. It follows that the accident plane would have the same problem.
The team assumes that the cable for the right thrust lever bound, preventing it from moving. To compensate, the autopilot had to keep pulling back the left lever. What's unclear is why Sriwijaya let the throttle system deteriorate so badly.
You never let an airplane go with binding or friction. It's something that every line maintenance engineer, technician understands, that you have to isolate the problem and not accept any form of binding or friction in a control surface.
Okay. Thanks for your time.
Investigators interview officials from Sriwijaya Air to determine why the airline did not address the cable binding in the plane's throttle system.
Well, that was enlightening.
How so?
Management didn't think the auto throttle issues occurred frequently enough to warrant a grounding or an inspection. So they never knew that the cables weren't moving properly.
How could 65 malfunctions not be considered frequent enough?
Because it didn't meet the regulation's definition of a repetitive defect.
According to the Indonesian Ministry of Transportation, for an issue to be considered a repetitive defect, it must occur 3 times over 15 flights on the same aircraft. None of Sriwijaya Flight 182's auto-throttle issues met that condition.
So the system allowed a defect to slip through the cracks.
Looks like it.
It just seems strange that the thrust levers could split so much without some warning kicking in. Does the airplane have some fail-safe mechanism for preventing thrust lever asymmetry?
I'll look into it.
The 737 was unique by having independent thrust lever controls for the left and the right engines. And so that inherently provided for failure modes that could cause one thrust lever to be driven differently from the other.
You were right. 737 Classics have a system that disconnects the auto throttle.
The system is called the Cruise Thrust Split Monitor, or CTSM. It detects any significant difference in thrust between the left and right engines.
The CTSM is designed to disconnect the autothrottle before the split gets to be so much that the autopilot can't fight it.
Was the CTSM working properly?
Okay, the auto throttle is supposed to disconnect under these 3 conditions. The flaps are less than 12.5 degrees. The difference in power between the 2 engines is at least 700 pounds, and either spoiler is extended more than 2.5 degrees for more than 1.5 seconds.
Flight spoilers are surfaces on the wings that work in tandem with the ailerons to control an airplane's bank. Did Flight 182's flight parameters meet the conditions to automatically disconnect the autothrottle?
Okay, so their flaps were at 0.
Condition 1 met.
And the difference in power between the engines hit 700 pounds early in the flight.
Condition 2 met.
The spoiler hit 2.5 degrees for 1.5 seconds here.
Condition 3 met.
Except the auto throttle disengages 30 seconds after the spoilers met their condition.
Investigators now know the CTSM, the plane's last line of defense against the thrust asymmetry, activated too late.
The CTSM should have disconnected the autopilot and the autothrottle. Had the alarm sounded on the autothrottle disconnect, the flight crew members' attention would have been turned to the thrust levers, and they would have seen the split.
So, why did it take 30 seconds for the spoiler to trigger the CTSM?
The wreckage won't give us that answer.
Even though the debris at the bottom of the sea could not tell us about the flash spoiler, we tried to find the evidence somewhere else.
Investigators searched the maintenance records of the crashed 737 for evidence that would explain why the spoiler malfunctioned.
Anything?
Nothing. And it looks like there was no requirement to check it.
We found that there was no instruction from the aircraft manufacturer to inspect the flash spoiler system unless there was an abnormality.
As a result, the investigators have no way to determine what exactly caused the critical 30-second delay.
Here's the thing. Even though the auto throttle disengaged 30 seconds later than it should have, It doesn't explain why the pilots never caught the thrust asymmetry in the first place.
We need that CVR.
Hearing what happened inside the cockpit may be the only way to explain why the crew was late responding to the split thrust. Nearly 3 months after the accident, the investigation gets a big break. Divers find the memory card from Sriwijaya Air Flight 182's cockpit voice recorder.
We did it systematically, and thank God, last night at 8 o'clock, we found it.
Will the CVR explain why the pilots failed to notice the split in the thrust levers, and why the captain turned the plane the wrong way?
Okay, let's start here when the thrust levers begin to diverge. Let's see if they notice it.
Request heading change to 075 degrees to avoid weather. Sriwijaya 182.
Sriwijaya 182, heading 075 approved.
075, Sriwijaya 182.
Approach at 110. 110.
Not a word about the thrust levers. So now, the plane is starting to roll left.
It's what the investigators don't hear that stands out.
They don't notice.
They're not paying attention to the aircraft.
This is the time when the pilots should have time to monitor the aircraft.
The FDR shows the pilots had several indications that things were going wrong on Flight 182. If they had monitored their primary flight display, they would have noticed that they were in a left bank instead of a right one. If they had looked at the control column, they would have seen that it didn't return to center after commanding the right turn. And most importantly, if they had checked their thrust levers, they would have realized that they were split.
These are three major breakdowns in the way the airplane is supposed to be operating, any one of which should have drawn the attention of either flight crew member.
They gave all responsibility for flying the plane to the auto throttle and the autopilot.
Auto throttle? Arm.
It's what investigators call the ironies of automation.
Flight crews become more and more confident that the automatic system is going to fly the airplane safely. So the pilot's not really thinking that the airplane is going to be in any kind of difficulty.
So when did they finally clue in to the fact that they were banking left instead of right? Okay, let's hear more.
Set standard.
Sriwijaya 182, climbing to altitude 130, roger.
130.
130.
Bank angle, bank angle. Bank angle, bank angle.
Oh, sorry.
Bank angle, bank angle.
They seem confused.
They're totally unaware of their situation. Because they're flying in clouds but not looking at the instruments, it's the bank angle warning that clues them in.
The crew was clearly startled. They didn't understand what was going on.
Bank angle, bank angle. Terrain. Oh, up.
Well, the captain hears the bank angle warning, looks at his control wheel, sees it deflected right, then turns it left, making the situation worse.
Did the first officer provide any assistance to the captain?
The first officer isn't helping at all. He's completely forgotten all his procedures.
The co-pilot did not provide significant information to the captain. The aircraft attitude, whether at left or right, or pitching down or pitching up, as described in the procedures.
Even after the auto throttle disengages, it still takes the captain 10 seconds to bring the right thrust lever back to idle. If the auto throttle disengaging doesn't prompt him to do that, what does?
It was the overspeed warning.
15 seconds into the dive, the plane is accelerating to near the speed of sound. It's on the verge of breaking up, so the cockpit's overspeed warning sounds.
With the overspeed condition, that's when he finally realizes that both engines need to be at idle, and they make that correction.
He finally corrects the asymmetry. But it's too little, too late.
If the aircraft flying higher, maybe 30,000 feet, the aircraft might have recovered.
In the final report, released more than a year and a half after the crash, investigators highlight the many failings that contributed to the crash of Flight 182. Chief among them was the failure of the pilots to pay attention to what their plane was telling them during the flight.
What happened was the sense of confidence and complacency towards the automation system may have caused poor monitoring and awareness of other instruments and activities.
The report also highlights the failure of maintenance, both at the line and management levels, in recording a history of auto-throttle malfunctions.
For them not to take the time to take the aircraft out of service and effectively troubleshoot it in today's era is just not heard of. You have to ensure that you're upholding safety and you're taking every action to troubleshoot and inspect the airplane.
It was tragic that no pilot reported thrust lever split in their failures. They always reported them as autothrottle issues, but they didn't say the words thrust lever split. If the pilots don't report the problem accurately, nobody's going to fix it.
Sriwijaya Air committed to improving its training for both pilots and maintenance engineers. But today the airline is a much smaller operation. Its fleet consists of 4 aircraft. Only one of its 737-500s is still in use.
This accident gave the world a valuable lesson that simple problems could lead to a catastrophe. There's our hope that this kind of incident will never happen again in the future.